is for training purposes in TV news education. Some copyrighted material is used and is credited on screen. However, no more was taken than was necessary to tell the story of the event. YBA claims fair use of material.
Hey there, welcome back. It is now time for the sports segment of Wicked Team. I am your host, Alex Barth. Alongside me, Bradley Ifcher, Leah Mailer, George Erickson. We are your panel for this sports discussion. And we're going to start off with the Red Sox in a series with the Yankees, very heated rivalry. George, you have the highlights of last night's game?
Yes, I do. As you said, the Yankees clashed with the Red Sox in the classic rivalry. And the pitching matchup was John Lester versus CC Sabathia. And we have some highlights. And it started in the 5th inning, top of it, 2 outs. Adrian Gonzalez hits a booming shot into right field, his 10th of the season, 62 RBIs on the year for him now. It was a 3-run shot, gave the Sox a 6-1 lead. Then it was Jason Nix who hit a 2-run homer, 4th of the year, and it narrowed the deficit to 6-3. And now with 12 RBIs on the year for Nix. And in the 8th inning, Mark Teixeira makes it a tie ball game with 2 outs. The 20th home run on the year for Tex, 6-6 ball game off Vicente Padilla. And here Pedro Siriaco, and just hits a lazy fly ball, and the Grandy man can't. And Siriaco turns on the Jets. Granderson gets it back, but 2 runs will score. Siriaco missiles into third with a triple. 8-6 lead now as Soriano gives up the lead. That ended up being the final score. Andrew Miller was able to get the win. And speaking of the Red Sox, they might try and add a pitcher, maybe a Matt Garza, a Josh Johnson, or maybe even deal a guy like Josh Beckett. And Beckett has 5 years of veto rights, and the problem with that is that he can only go, if he gets traded, it has to be a team that he wants to go to because he decides whether or not he wants the deal. The top teams right now are the Rangers and the D-backs. They are right now in on Beckett the most. And also moving on to another starter, we got Josh Johnson. He is a Miami Marlin, but the Rangers definitely looking for a starter. He could be added to their roster. Also looking at the Blue Jays, maybe possibly Indians, and as I said, the Diamondbacks, maybe for Beckett, but also Johnson. Johnson may be a place. And that offseason really ended up being nothing for Miami Marlins as they are shopping their ace. And now Matt Garza here, as you can see, had a tricep injury, so he's not going to have any more starts. He was scheduled to start today, but he shall not. So that is something that teams will worry about. Will he continue to start for this season for contending teams? The Rangers, the Blue Jays, and since he's proved that he can pitch in the AL East, Blue Jays, I think, are the favorite. What do you guys think on this?
Yeah, Liam, you can go first.
I would say with the Matt Garza thing, whether or not the Red Sox are a player, I think is the biggest issue here, considering if they want him, they'll go after him hard. I think the Blue Jays may not necessarily need him because I think they're more realistic than the Red Sox. The Red Sox aren't honestly looking at whether or not they don't care whether or not they're going to make the playoffs or not. They're going to trade for a big name because it's going to get good press. The Blue Jays are going to be more realistic, maybe look for sellers, but maybe even be sellers. So I don't know if it makes sense for them to go after him. And then on Josh Johnson, that's going to cost a boatload for any team.
Yeah. Well, as you said about the Blue Jays, they lost Brandon Morrow, they lost Drew Hutchison, and they lost Kyle Drabeck, and they lost Jose Bautista for 15 days, so that was a big blow. So they would be contenders, and adding a big arm would definitely help.
I think what you touched on in terms of Josh Beckett, and he has to go to a team where he wants to go to, I think that could make it a problem for the Red Sox to want to deal him if you think
And he
about it.
doesn't want to leave. So.
Right, he doesn't want to leave. He's got a good deal here in Boston. He can pitch mediocre, still make the big bucks. Chances are, if he goes, the team's going to want to re-up his contract, refigure it. He's not going to make as much money, so he's only going to go somewhere that will come in and say, okay, we'll leave your contract or we'll sign you to a bigger contract. Especially today's day and age, you see mostly players, even if they have a 4 or 5 year contract, after they're traded, restructure the deal. I think Beckett wouldn't be able to do that and gain anything from it. And I think there really aren't a lot of suitors for him. The Blue Jays are, I think, in terms of going after a starting pitcher, the Blue Jays are the #1 team that wants a starter right now. I think even more than the Rangers, because the Rangers wouldn't want to give up as much. They're in a very good position right now. But the Red Sox are not going to deal Beckett to the Blue Jays. They don't want him within the division. It is very rare you see a player, especially a starting pitcher, dealt in the division. Outside of that, I don't see the Rangers going too hard after Josh Beckett. I don't think the Diamondbacks really will have that much that the Sox want. I think he's still in Boston at the end of the year.
Trevor Bauer, Tyler Skaggs, Archie Bradley.
Well,
Those are 3 big weapons.
It's a matter of how they fit in the Sox system, though. I mean, of course, at this point, I'm not. Like I said before the show, you know more about baseball than me. I don't know if any of those guys are a third baseman or not, but just an example. If one of those
pitchers.
They're all pitchers. All right, so then it might work out better where you get some young pitchers, but they have young pitchers in the minors right now. I think going out and getting young pitchers doesn't help at this point. Then you get somebody that goes right now. And that's all they can take at this point because, for instance, if they were to get offered a third baseman prospect, as good as he might look, you don't want a repeat of the Kevin Youkilis fiasco a year, 2 years down the line. You don't want to bring in a first baseman and repeat it with Adrian Gonzalez. Bradley, your thoughts on the trading deadline?
It's a close call.
Well, you're from Florida. What do you think about Josh Johnson?
He's all right.
Would you be ashamed to see him leave?
Yeah, sort of. He's really a big guy for us and fan favorite also, so yeah.
He had a great 2011 season, so the 2012 season has definitely been a disappointment, but that big offseason that they had this season is starting to break down. They've been shopping Reyes. They already traded Hanley Ramirez.
Yeah, that surprised me.
They traded Sanchez. They traded Infante, and then they got this young pitcher named Jacob Turner, top prospect. They're definitely saying, okay, we spent a ton of money, but it's not going to work. We're going to trade all of our guys. We're going into rebuilding mode. I think that's kind of what they're saying. And now that they're going to have to deal with El Caballo, Carlos Lee, another guy that they got who's now going to have to leave, or they just keep him.
Liam?
I would say with Josh Johnson, it's going to cost too much for most teams to really go after him. It's going to really cut it down to a very limited amount of teams, and then whether or not they're willing to part with that much amount of currency, you could say, with players.
Yeah, and ESPN was reporting earlier in the week that most general managers around Major League Baseball were at the consensus that the Marlins were asking a ridiculous amount for Josh Johnson. And for a guy who is a question mark, who has not pitched as well this year as he has in the past, you're not giving him up a lot. And a guy he reminds me of is Dontrelle Willis. He was an outstanding starter for the Marlins in middle decade 04-05 era. And, I mean, he just retired this year. I think people had assumed he'd been retired for 3 or 4 years. He really had not been a major name in baseball. You see a lot of starting pitchers like that. I think Josh Johnson could have that written on him. A guy who really got by just because of the speed of his fastball. And if that falls off, he becomes a much less dynamic pitcher.
Yeah, though the Rangers, Josh Johnson would be a guy that would fit with them.
That, I think, would be the best fit for him.
And also, that team is loaded in the system. Martin Perez, Jurickson Profar, Mike Olt. You just name it. They got that system is amazing. And then when you add all the veteran players that they're just trying to re-sign, even though they're trying to re-sign them, it doesn't look like that they'd want to leave when they're doing so well. Right. So that's another thing.
And there's one other pitcher we haven't mentioned, who another Cubs pitcher actually, because you talked about Ryan Garza earlier. Dempster, he was minutes away from being traded to the Red Sox. He was minutes away from being traded to the Dodgers. Kind of reminds me of the whole Dwight Howard situation going on right now. He was minutes away from being traded to the Braves. I think there's 3 or 4 teams that he has been traded to at some point. It has fallen through for one reason or another. Does he finally get dealt, do you think, or is he a Cub for the rest of the year?
Well, it's either he goes to the Dodgers or they're just going to have to re-up his contract because that's the only team he wants to go to. He said, my first choice is Dodgers, second choice is Braves, so they're saying, okay, then we'll first try on the Braves, and they're like, nah, I don't want to go to the Braves. So now they're thinking, okay, either we go to the Dodgers or we try and re-sign him to this mega contract that maybe he's not worth. So.
Well, do you think he goes to the Dodgers? We saw them give up very little to get Hanley Ramirez, who I think is despite his tough season, is a very good player.
Nathan Eovaldi, who's a great starter.
The 96th ranked prospect in the Dodgers organization for Hanley Ramirez, a guy who's been an all-star. I think that is a steal of a trade.
All in baseball, Nathan Eovaldi was doing great aside from 1 or 2 starts in the majors, and he was great in 2011. He just needs run support. Though, yeah, I do think that the Dodgers, they do not have that big mega system. They got a great system. I really like Zach Lee, but it's not that big loaded system that the Cubs would try and
There's not much for the Cubs to take from them.
Yeah.
Now, guys, moving back to Josh Beckett here, I see if the Red Sox do try to trade him, it would cost them more money than it's worth. Yeah. They're gonna have to absorb at least half of that contract.
They may have to give players in addition. They may say, okay, we'll take Beckett off your hands, but if he doesn't work out for us, we want a young pitcher too as insurance.
Maybe a
Felix to fill that spot. Felix DeBron, or maybe going down into the minors and getting somebody.
Henry Owens.
Right. It may cost them to deal Beckett. They may not want to. Now, Lester, on the other hand, there has been some less talk. John Lester, I think, is a guy, he's having an off year.
They weren't going to trade him.
Right. I don't think he's done. He's pitched back-to-back 200-inning years. I think he's tired.
Yeah, his fastball's been a couple mile an hour
They need to cut his innings down, skip some stars for him, let him more or less take the rest of the year off, because they're done at this point. Let him get ready for next year. But if they did deal him, now that is a guy I think that could really possibly drum up some revenue. Also, Buchholz. I know he hasn't been talked about, but if the Red Sox do want to trade a starter, after his injury, he has been good and bad. He's been inconsistent. And if you're really trying to redo this team, when a team is truly in rebuilding, which some people are saying the Red Sox need to go into a true rebuilding phase, not just the kind of rebuilding they're in now, and no player is off limits. David Ortiz still will not get traded, for those of you who saw my rant on Liam earlier in the week, but no players off limits. I think Buchholz's a guy who could bring some stuff in. All right, so we move on from baseball to football. Happy New Year, guys. Training camp started this week.
Yeah.
And you guys been yet? I know Bradley, me and him went yesterday. Did you guys get a chance to go over to Foxborough yet?
I haven't got a chance. I hope I can go sometime soon.
Well, I know they announced an additional session Tuesday. Today was originally supposed to be the last day. Players getting Monday off. Tuesday, there's going to be another full pad session. And let me start out with you, Bradley. You were there at training camp with me.
Yeah.
What player do you think stood out the most for the Patriots?
Well, Brandon Lloyd, he had a crazy good catch over one of the
Rozai
defenders.
Dowling.
Yes. And Gronkowski, his ankle looks very well.
Liam?
Yeah, I'd have to say that I haven't gotten a chance to watch much of it, but I really, if I do get a chance to go, I would love to see how Welker's treating it, whether or not he's going at full speed and really caring as much about it, playing for a new contract, or if he's a bit bitter about not getting.
Well, I know touch on the Welker thing a little bit. Not so much Welker himself. However, Julian Edelman was playing very scrappy at practice, always make contact afterwards. So he was going at it. He's putting himself, I think, in a position if Welker doesn't come back to fill that void.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I do go, a guy I want to watch is Dante Hightower. I really want to see how he transitions. I think he can be a big player, great addition, so I definitely like to watch Hightower.
And, two guys I saw that I like, both undrafted players. You mentioned Dante Hightower at the middle linebacker, but a different middle linebacker who was getting snaps with the first team alongside Gerard Mayo was Dane Fletcher, who they brought in a couple years ago, the undrafted rookie out of Montana, a guy I've always liked. I think he's a very tough, old-school football player. Mostly special teams, but I would love to see him get in on some more snaps. Wears 52, and he wears it well. He reminds me a lot of Ted Johnson. Another guy, Brandon Bolden, undrafted rookie out of Ole Miss. They say he's the second coming of Ben Jarvis Green Ellison. If you look at his numbers from Ole Miss, they're similar. A little less production, but they cut a die. I think at this point they're saying Bolden is the fourth running back on this team. He's not going to get a lot of reps this year, but remember Ben Jarvis Green also was mostly fullback when he came, and he, in the limited action I saw, he looked good. He did a good job finding the corner on pitch drills. He made some solid catches, especially along the line. He looked okay in blocking. I mean, he wasn't outstanding, but for running back, he was getting his job done. He's a guy who excited me.